second semester, right? But definitely, like some of you have forgotten, and it can happen. So what basically I'm going to do is a little revision on that, a little, so that you remember what are the different things that we have. Okay, so first and foremost, when I actually talk with all of you, it's a organization. We have been talking about organization since day one, like what is organization, and we did talk about saying that organization, like it's an entity. We can call this as an entity which has a lot of people who are there. A lot of people, when I say, I am also including the top level management as well as the employees. Everyone is part of the organization, right, who work together. For what purpose? Who come together, who work together to achieve a particular objective. How is this objective set? It is set by the top management. They frame the long term objectives. And once the objectives are framed, that's when you have, then the work is divided, and we have three different layers of management: the top level, middle level, and the lower level. And below that we have the employees. And once that is done, then we have the work gets allocated. There are different sort of different group of people under different department that we have. And so what happens, different departments, they actually get to know what work is being done, what has to be done. Each department has the departmental heads. They tell, okay, this is a work that has to be done, and this is, each one of you in that department have to work this way, and you need to individual. There are some work, there is also some work which is like where you work together. You're also working together, and it's coordination between within the department. Each department has their own goals based on the overall goals of the organization. And then there has to be an interaction between the different departments also, so that you will need to work in hand. Say suppose the marketing department cannot work by themselves without the research and R&D department, research and development department. It's not possible. Or the finance department, like cannot just work by themselves until and unless you have a proper marketing being done, customer service being done. So it's all working together. You work hand in hand, and then you start achieving the objectives. Okay, so this is basically the thing that comes up, right? And now what exactly happens up here is, now when we talk of organization, there are certain, for every organization, whether it's any sort of organization, they need to follow certain principles, some basic principles. This is basic for every single organization. Other than that, there are some specific work or principles which the organization follows. So we're not going to discuss that because it's difficult, but we're going to talk about the general principles which every organization needs to follow. The first one that comes up is purpose. Why is an organization formed? What is the purpose of that organization? That every single person has to be very much clear about it. Like when you join a new company, your bosses will tell you what is the purpose of the organization, what are the rules, what are the do's and don'ts, what are the objectives. So you really need to know why is it being set up. And when you're working there, at the end of the day, you should be actually very much clear about it, why you are here, why are you working in that organization, what are you trying to achieve, what is the your individual achievement is there, but it is through the achievement of the organization. So what is the purpose, why are you out here? Okay, second that comes up is where we talk of authority and responsibility. That's where it comes up is, who is your boss? Whom are you responsible? Whom are you, do you have to report? Do you have one person, or do you have multiple person up there to whom you have to report? And also when it comes up is, what is your responsibility as an individual in that organization? What is your work? What work do you have to do? What each of us have some specific work, be it a manager, be it the boss, be it a common employee. That's there. Third that comes up is responsibility of supervision. Like if you have people below you working, who's there below you should be knowing whom do you have to monitor, whom do you have to actually guide. That's important, because like you, if you do not know who to whom are you answerable to, or whom you have to supervise, then it's a problem. Because people who are below you, they look up to you as the role model, as someone with to whom they can approach when they have problem, and you should be out there to monitor, to guide. Similarly, as you as an individual, you would also expect your bosses to look after you, take care of you. It has to be someone with whom you can discuss. So it has to be both ways. Okay. The next that comes up is scalar principle. Scalar, as we say, is the line of authority. Okay. So line of authority, when we talk of line of authority, that is basically a formal line of authority that we are talking about. Okay. It is just straight done like this. It has to be there. Like who's there on the top? Then at the top is your top level management. Then comes the middle level management. Then the low level management. Then the employees. So as a common employee, like if you see at RTC when you're here up here, so you do not, if you have a problem, you do not just go up to the president's office or the director's office and start talking. If you, it's something to do with your module, you first talk with your module tutor. Then if it depends, then it's, you have your program leaders, then the dean, and then at the last, that's the last stage. So one has to be very careful. That's the line, and we need to know what is that line of authority. We just cannot cross it, cross that boundary and just walk into it. So that's what it is. Next comes up is span of control. Span means the extent. Okay. Now what happens is, like in certain cases, what we really see is like we have, you are asked to, you if you are there below you, there are a lot of people whom you have to supervise. And the problem that comes up here is, like if you have a lot of people to supervise, it becomes a problem. You really do not know, have a one-to-one interaction. Like that's the reason why we have this decentralization happening. Okay, because if you start your own business, and if your business is a small business, then it's easy for you to monitor, very few people there. As the business grows, it's difficult for you to monitor. One is to one monitoring does not happen. Then you need to decentralize. You need to have people, more people up there who would be taking care of it. So that's important. So span of control is a big thing. Like certain organizations, if they have, if it's a narrow, that can be narrow span of control, because that means what, you have below you, there are a lot of people whom you have to supervise. That becomes difficult. It can happen like when you are taking care of multiple departments, with departments which are interrelated, say marketing and sales. Usually it is two different departments, but if it's sometimes interrelated and you have department for marketing people are there, sales people are there, and you're together, you're monitoring both, that means there are a lot of people. Then it becomes difficult. How do you monitor? You're just saying for the sake of saying, oh yeah, this is what's happening, that's what's happening, but it's really difficult at that time. So that's the narrow span. Whereas when we talk of a wider span is where you have limited number of people and it becomes really easier. That means in that case, the marketing department and sales department are separate with separate heads. It becomes easier. Okay. Next that comes up is specialization of functions. Now we've discussed this also, that each employee, when you are being recruited in an organization, you're recruited for a particular post. You have certain skills. It's up to the organization to ensure that they utilize your skills in the right way. That's important, very, very important at that time. So how do they actually put you, assign you with the right kind of work based on your skills? When a project is actually coming about, that's when they say that, okay, that this project, the project is happening and we really need you up here. Personally, we may have problems. I've discussed this in class also, that you all can have problems with each other. Some of you do not want to some of you do not want to sit with each other. So happens. So in that case, what happens is like when you have this problem, but when you're actually working together, then what happens is personal differences do not matter anymore. You have to work together, and the organization actually sees, what do they see? They see who is the right person. So you have to forget your personal differences, be professional, come and do the work. So it's your specialization skills. That's why you're up here in the organization. So that's important. The other thing that comes up is coordination, right? That's the most important thing. You need to coordinate individually. You can be the best in your field, in your skills. There's no one there. But that doesn't mean that you will be actually snubbing others. You'll be putting others down and saying, oh, I'm the best. I'm not willing to listen to any sort of suggestions. That you cannot do. You should be willing to listen to suggestions. That can be someone who may not have your skills, but someone who has the general ability. They're looking into the situation. Sometimes it happens. Those who do not have the skills also, they just come and say, oh, but I feel, look in the situation, I feel this can also be taken into consideration. That can be a good suggestion. So you really need to be open to it. And you should be able to work together. You cannot say I'm the best, they are not good. I am no, that is not the thing. Of course you're good, but individually, but if you cannot work together, if you cannot work in a team, then you're a failure. It doesn't help. No organization runs by themselves. It's a teamwork, right? So I did tell you about this. It's a teamwork. So you have to be there. And the other thing that is very basically which happens up here, something another, the last principle that comes up is what's called definition. Definition in the sense, whatever we are discussing about this right now, every organization needs to put it down in writing. It has to be there. Otherwise, tomorrow when you join an office and then something happens, you can question your boss, but where is it written? Show me the proof. So it has to be documented. That's the most important thing. Okay. Any questions up here? Is there anyone who has any questions? Or should I?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No,
No,
madam. Go
no,
on.
No,
ma'am.
madam.
No, ma'am.
No,
No,
madam.
madam.
No, ma'am.
Okay. Right. So let's proceed with the next part of it, where we are talking about the organizational structure. Right? Organizational structure, as I said, structure means what? It's a framework. When we talk of a structure, it's basically a framework which tells you how the organization should be working, whether there should be centralization of power, whether there should be decentralization of power, how many departments, who all will be there at the top management, who all would be there at the middle level, how many people, lower level, in how many departments would you want, and how many people should be working in each department. How are you going to work about? How would you frame your strategies? How would you frame your vision, the mission, goals, objectives? How would you implement a plan? How do you plan? How do you implement? And how would you monitor? What about even the feedback? What sort of feedback system do you have? So if anything goes wrong, then what happens up here is who is actually going to be responsible for it. So it's an entire system. So it's a framework. So structure is a framework which decides all these things. Like it tells you your responsibilities, your the level of supervision, whom do you report to, what is your work, what you don't have to do, what are the do's, what are the don'ts. Everything comes under when we talk of structure. Okay, now there's a slight difference between when we say structure and a design. Now, when we are actually changing the existing structure, or when we are actually trying to, let's say if you have your own first time the organization, when you said, when you start framing the structure of the organization, when you start framing, when you start working on the structure, you decide, okay, this will be the right kind of structure. The process of coming up with the right kind of structure, and later on, if needed, some changes also coming up in the existing structure. That entire process is called organization design. So there's a difference. Some of us, we tend to make a mistake between structure and design. Structure is the framework, and the process of making that framework, initial framework, come then making some changes to come up with a better framework. That entire process is called organization design. So we are basically today's class, organizational designs, we're going to talk in the next class, but today's class is where we talk about the organizational structure. Now, when we talk of the structure, certain things have to be kept in mind when we design this. The first comes up is your specialization, work specialization. Work specialization, and where it seems that you need to, you as the boss of the company, you really need to know how many people you need for your company, how many people is required, how that depends, like how many departments you need, how many people you need, and what are the qualifications that you require. Like if you see the advertisements coming up in the business, in the newspapers when they come up, if you see on these on the jobs, on-site jobs, that's there, where they say that required such and such person for such and such post, this should be the qualification, this should be the age, all these things come up. Now, this is possible only when you have a clear cut strategy. Then only can you say, okay, I need these sort of there, I need, say, 50 people, and out of that 50 people, what happens is I want like 10 should be qualified in this, 10 should be qualified in some other, so X qualification, having a X skill, someone having a Y skills. So it depends, and that's how it goes about. So if that is not clear, then the organization cannot run. People will start, they start fighting, and they, when you do not know what your work is, what happens? There's a chaos and becomes a big problem. So that's what work specialization when we talk about. The second thing that comes up is departmentalization. Now you have people who are specialized, and everyone cannot do every single work. You need to categorize them, divide them into different groups, different departments. Departments, how do you there can be multiple departments. Now, how will you categorize the departments? How will you make these departments based on what criteria? Now, there can be different ways how you can make these departments. One is definitely based on the functions. Functions is the jobs, the nature of jobs. We can talk about the marketing department, we can talk of the sales department, we can talk of R&D department, we talk of the financial department, the purchase department. So these are based on the functions, the nature of the jobs. The second type of department categorization is based on the product, the type of products. Different products require different group of people to work onto it. That's what it is, products. Like, which means what? People with different skills will be working together to achieve that, to design that product, to come up with that product. That's the second type. Third comes up is based on the geographical differentiation. Geographical differentiation means, like, let's say that's basically when we have companies, big companies, and they have their own the branches in different parts of the country or different parts of the world. So what happens? You have different group of people working in different branches, and sometimes what happens, you get transferred within the company country or outside the country. So it's area wise, again, different types of different people with different skills are working there. So when we talk of geographical departmentalization, it's basically, like these branches are working as individual units, individual independent units, and you have people working there. So that's one. The next comes up is process. It's based the process in the sense, like when we talk of process could be like someone it's a weaving, spinning. These are the process to achieve. Someone who's good at spinning, you're going there. It's one work, but the process of doing some requires spinning to be that is handmade, they require the spinning. Some requires where you go for assembling, that's there. So it depends. Some requires weaving, it's there. So it depends upon it. The next type that comes up is based on customers. So customers, then again, what different groups of customers require different types of products. So you, as the owner of the organization, what you try to do is you select your members, your employees for select, say, if you have, say, 100 employees working under you, you select 10 people who would be taking care of a specific sector of the customers, one group of customers who have similar wants. So it's easy to have these 10 people assigned. The work becomes much more easier. Another 10 goes for another group of customers. So that's how it goes. And when we talk of customers not just in your own city, customers across, both within the country, outside the country. And the last thing that comes up is where we talk about cross-functional teams. Now, cross-functional is inter-department. There has to be certain employees who should be capable of working between departments. Say, for instance, I just gave you the example right in the morning where we were talking about sales and marketing. It's similar, right? But so what happens? Marketing and sales has to work hand in hand. So you should be able to work together. So these certain functions which are overlapping, a person, say, in the marketing should be also able to take care of the sales. So that is cross-functional. Okay. So this is a second category. That's a second criteria that we have to need to take into consideration when we talk of organizational structure. Now, the third that comes up is where we talk of, we just said, chain of command. Chain of command is, in the other words, the meaning is line of authority, right? Who's right there at the top? Below, so at the top is the top management, the board of directors, then the management. In the management, you have the top management, which is there. Then comes up the middle management, then comes up the lower management, and then you have the employees. So you should be knowing whom do you report to. Sometimes we report to multiple bosses. It can happen. It can happen that you're reporting, and sometimes it's one person. And below you, whom do you have to supervise? You not just have to report to someone at the top, but you also need to actually supervise people who are below you. So that has to be there. That's a chain of command, and it's much easier, if you have one person to report to. There's no confusion up there. If you have multiple people, then what happens? Then the problem that comes up is, like, you find it confusing. Different bosses starts giving different sort of instructions, and then problem comes up. So that becomes a little confusing. But sometimes it is needed where you are working inter-department, and there you need to have maybe say, if you are in a project and you're working for the finance department, so your financial head, the financial manager is there whom you report. But at the same time, you're part of a project, so the project manager is also there. So it happens. So if one is very much clear with their objectives, if the management is very clear, then the confusion doesn't arise. It works in hand. But if you're not clear with it, then the confusion comes up. Each tries to show their ego, their power, and they say, okay, mine is the best, and you have to listen. And the employees, people who are working below you, becomes also confused. So that's basically the thing that comes up with. So when we talk of chain of command, one thing that, as I said, is, if we saw, one is the authority, right? Where is your position? Whom do you report to? Whom do you monitor, right? Second comes up is your work. What is your responsibility as an employee of that organization? That has to be clearly mentioned. Third comes up, when you know what your responsibility is, then what happens? Anything going wrong with your work, automatically it's easy to track who is the person. So which means what? Accountability. You are held accountable for your job. If you do not know what your work is, then what happens? Anything going wrong, like, each of us would like to say, oh, I'm not responsible, someone else is responsible. But if my job is clearly defined and I know there's no one else who's taking care of that work, anything going wrong in the work that I do, I have to be accountable for it. So clearly that's where it comes up. And also when we talk of, as I said, command, it's always better if you have one single person who is monitoring you and to whom you report. It becomes much more easier. And when that happens, then you know what? The other thing that comes up here is delegation of work. So you should know, like, when you are whom would you like to give the work to? It has to be clearly mentioned. So I have five people working under me. Each of you would be assigned with this is your work. If I do not know how to delegate the work, it will be chaos. People are not going to work properly because I am a failure. As the boss, I am a failure. I was not able to delegate the work to you. So that becomes a big problem. So this is where it comes up when we talk of chain of command. Okay, if that is working, it becomes much more easier. Employees are also clear with what are the do's, don'ts, how to go about. If there's any issue, who to approach to, it's very much clear about it. Okay. Now, the next thing that comes up is when we talk of span of control. That's what I was saying. Span of control is the extent of control. It could be narrow, it could be wide. Now, when I say narrow, narrow means what happens? You have less people to control. Less people to control, right? Just below you, like under me. If I'm at the sitting there, if I have a company, so below me there are four people. Below them, there'll be, say, four people. So I'm responsible for four persons. Below me, below them, suppose there are 16 people. So 16 people means what? Four and then 16. So each is again taking care of four people. It becomes much more easier to monitor. That's how it should be going about. Again, 16 means below them, each taking care of four means 16 into 4, 64. So you are actually responsible for only four people. It's much more easy to take charge of it, take control of it, look into their personal welfare, ensure what are the skills needed, ensure that they get it, and it works. Rather, what happens is if I have the others, that is where we talk of narrow, which is much more specific and it helps. If, for instance, the other hand, I am taking care of 8 people, right? And we say, okay, each of us is responsible for 8 people. So what happens? Below them, those 8 people, each taking care of 8 people means 64 people working. Now, it's quite difficult to handle this. 64 people working and you're responsible for it. It's much more difficult. It's difficult. So wider span of control is much more, it's difficult, but you know what happens? Wider span of control is when the employer is much more relaxed and say, okay, I know I can trust my people and they will do the work, and you're not so much concerned about it. Then it becomes, that's how it comes about. And you trust your employees. You know, it's okay, they will do it. You do not have proper monitoring. But if you actually really want to do a proper monitoring and see monitoring as well as take care of your employees, then it's always best to go for a narrow span of control. That is always there. So this is where we actually talk about the narrow span of control, the span of wider and narrow span of control. And the next thing that comes up is where we are talking from here is centralization and decentralization. Centralization of power. Now, if you start your own business for the first time, you are only there. You start by yourself, and then slowly you have people working under you, less people. So you, as the boss of the company, you are very much involved with every single work that is going on. It's very much, so that goes on. It's easy for you to monitor. You are actually fully involved with the work that is going on. And so you know what is the problem, what are the hurdles, what's the good thing that's happening, what are the problems that's coming and what changes has to be made. So you work together with your employees and do it. But the power is in your hand. Now, as you increase your scale of business, your business will grow. Then what happens? Today you have 4 people who are working with you. Tomorrow, what happens at some point, you have 1,000 people working under you. It is not possible for you to monitor 1,000 people individually. How will you monitor? Everyone is not available at the same time. You cannot run after 1,000 people every day. It's very difficult. So that's when you have to decide, how is the monitoring going to help? How would you take care of your employees? How would you see the planning, the idea that you have is being implemented in the right way? And how would you see that it's a success? How do you achieve your objective? So that's when you need to delegate power to others. So that is where we talk of decentralization of power. That's where we have the different layers of management. At the top level, there are very few. Below that is the middle level. Top level management is where we have let's talk of the chairperson of the company. We have the managing directors, the general managers, GMs are there sitting there. Sometimes the owners are also sitting there. Below them is the middle level, middle level management is the departmental heads, branch managers, and the departmental heads who are up there. So they know the top management what is happening, what is the decision, and then they take it down to their respective departments and they delegate the work. That's how it becomes easier. And in the department also, if you are the departmental head, you know there are certain people working, and then you assign the work how it should be done. So the work gets decentralized. And then at the lower level, you have the supervisors. Supervisors are there who are actually supervising the employees, the common employees who are working, who are dealing with the customers, who are dealing with the suppliers, who are handling the government law, legal issues, government issues. They're the ones who are handling all these things. So it's easy. So the work gets decentralized, it gets divided, but it is possible when you have a clear cut rules and regulations, when you know what the work is. Otherwise, it becomes really, really problematic. So that's how the work gets done. And what happens? Person who is actually down there at the lower level, the common employees, when they're the ones who are doing the work, whatever problems that is there, whatever problem they are facing, they need to report back to the lower level management, which is the first line of management. They are the immediate supervisors, and the supervisors should be willing to listen to the whatever the problem is, whatever the feedback. That feedback is taken back to the middle level management, the departmental heads, who report to the top level that this is what the problem is, and then the top level, based on the feedback, good, bad, whatever it is, they make the next round of decision. That's how it should be going about. So if this process, which means in this case what is needed is a two-way communication system. It cannot be just one sided, that okay, the bosses say and you have to do, and you cannot reply back. You cannot give reply back, means not being arrogant, but problems. You answer, say okay, we're saying we've done this, but this is the problem that we're having. So wow, if we could change this, if certain changes are there, or the customers are saying this is the problem, so what do we do about it? If we can make certain changes, so that should be there. So it has to be two-way communication system. From the top, the decisions are being made. From the bottom, it's top down is your decisions. Bottom up is the feedback system that is there. So it has to be both ways, and then only it works. So otherwise, it becomes a big problem. So that's where we talk of centralization and decentralization of power. Okay. And the last thing that we come up today's class is where we talk of formalization. That's the other characteristics of having a good organizational structure. Formalization comes from the word formal. Formal means some standardized structure, standardized rules and regulations. That's where we talk about the manual of the company, HR manual, as well as the manual for all the which talks about the organizational culture when we join in a company, right? Here, when I came here, when I joined here at RTC, so we had to go for a training. All of you have a student's handbook, which is student's manual, where you know the do's and don'ts, what is expected, what is not, what are the consequences, what happens. Even we have a manual that is faculty handout. We have it. And we also had a training that should be there. So we really know, you know, if you're part of the system, you know what is happening, you know what are the do's and don'ts, what is expected, what you cannot do, and what the consequences can be. We know as faculty, as staff, we know what can be the consequences if we violate things, what can we do, what we cannot do, because we already have that training. You all have students, you all had your orientation, and we have that handbook. So which that means it has to be documented. If these things were not documented, and some, if you had, sometimes you've done you've done some work, and if the authorities feel and come and ask you, oh, but you shouldn't have done this, you know, you have to pay a penalty for this, you will be penalized for this, so automatically you can question, but where is it written? Today we cannot say this because it's there in the handbook. If we say, oh, but where is it written? Then the question will come, have you read the handbook? You were part of the orientation. So even students orientation happen, faculty orientation happen. So we cannot just say this because it's documented. That's what formalization, formal means things which are documented. Certain things are documented, which talks about the organizational culture, the work ethics, what is expected, what is not expected, what happens, what can be the consequences of violating certain things, what are the protocols of saying promotion, how is it being done. So everything, your salary structure, how will it be there, when do you get your promotion in a normal procedure, what is it, what's the thing, everything needs to be clearly done. Otherwise people are going to question you, and if you as the boss, if you are not clear about what is happening, then you cannot expect your employees to be also clear about it. There is bound to be a chaos out there. So that needs to be done. I mean, only when you have all these concepts, all these principles in place, these characteristics in place, will you have a very good organizational structure. Otherwise, your structure is bound to fail, and you know what? You'll have to think of it very soon, like within a very short span of time. You'll actually think of how can we redesign the structure. It's not. It's failing. Who's at fault? You as the boss. You're at fault. You did not think about it. Okay. Is this clear? Like, any questions from your side?
It's clear, ma'am.
It's
Clear,
clear.
ma'am.
Clear, ma'am.
Yes,
Clear,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Clear,
Clear, ma'am.
ma'am.
Clear,
Good.
ma'am.
Yeah, very much clear.
Clear,
And
ma'am. Madam, clear, clear. It's clear, ma'am.
okay,
Clear.
I mean, that's what we have today. It's from my side. This is where the class lecture, this is what we have for today's class. Now, if it's clear with all of you, let's go with the next part of today's class, where I told you that we're going to discuss about the case, right? Do you
Yes.
remember?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Do you have
Yes.
yes? Do you have the case in hand in front of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. Now tell me, like, what do you think about the case? And now I want an answer from all of you. What does the case talk about?
The
What
case
is it?
mainly talks about two companies merging together, having different cultures.
Right. So cultural differences, right?
Yes,
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 ma'am.
ma'am.
Okay. Now, if you go to, there are two questions which was asked to you, right? The first one which talks about the analyzation, right? Analyze. Yes or
Yes.
no?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So
Ma'am.
when we talk of analyze, when what exactly you have to do is analyze the case, is basically you cannot just say that two companies are there and they are merging with different cultures. That's not analyze. Okay. You have to go into much more, a little more in details where you have to think about is uh, what does the case actually say? There are certain things which are not said. So when you're talking of merging, so what can happen? Like what happens? Why do you feel the company is merging? And how do you think the company will adjust two different companies with two different cultures? How do you think it can happen? What could be the pros and cons and problems? So they've been talking about problems also, right? Yes or no?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
ma'am. Yes,
So,
ma'am.
yes.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
that's where we talk
Yes,
about the
ma'am.
challenges. The challenges are coming about. So that's the analyzation is where you have to look into the situation from different aspects. Not just saying two companies are merging together with different cultures. That's the basic thing, of course. But what is happening when you have two different cultures? What's the problem that comes up, and how do you think like what actually happened? The bosses are having problems. So how do you analyze this situation? So that's where you have to think of all these things. Okay. What does the second question say? Tell me. What is it? What does the second question say?
The
What is
reason behind the failure.
Yes. So, what do you think could be the reasons behind this failure? Two big companies, well-known companies, they've decided to come and merge with different cultures, but they're heading for a failure. So, why did this happen? What could have been the reasons behind this failure? Why? Despite our planning and everything, why did this happen?
Lack
What do you
of
think?
good
Yeah,
leadership, ma'am.
lack of,
Good leadership.
yes, lack of good leadership. What else?
Unplanned courses.
Lack
Unplanned,
of motivation.
lack of motivation. What about the
Poor
vision?
management.
Poor management, yes. What even the vision? When you merge together means there has to be a proper reason. That means that proper vision has to be there. When you do not have a proper vision, what happens? Everything goes wrong. Lack of proper strategy. Because merge means what? Two different companies. Say one company, just for an example, when you merge one company, your company, you have a company, I have a company. There are 200 people working in your company. In my company, say there are another 200 people who are there. When we merge together, we need to as bosses of the company, we need to work together, we need to cooperate, and not showing that, okay, I'm the boss, I have more power, you have less power. That should not happen. Employees, individual, your company has a different type of work culture, my company has a different type of work culture. Now when we merge together, the work culture gets changed. It's difficult for the employees to adjust to a new culture, difficult for people to adjust with new people. All of a sudden, 200 new people you have to work with. It's not an easy job. So that becomes a challenge, big challenge. So it's us as the bosses of the company who have to decide how would we want to go about with this? What sort of work culture would we want? What do we want from the employees? What are the do's and don'ts that we want? What do we expect? How do we ensure that the work culture is really friendly, professional but friendly, and everyone is able to work with each other? People are able to work as a team and not putting each other down. Coordination should happen. So you may be good in something, but there may be someone else from another company who's better. So that person is put as your boss, and you see, oh, all these days I've been the boss. Now I have someone else as the boss. That should not happen. So it all depends
Yes.
on the bosses of the company. So these are some of the reason factors which one has to think about when we go about for merger. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Now I clear with all of you.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am.
Okay. So what basically I want you all to do is like the second part. This is all that I have for the class today. The video, the Google Meet. What I want you all to do is your case is already there, and you already have it. Now, as I said, you have time till 1 o'clock, 1 p.m. today. Write the answers. Please go through the criteria for marking. Write the answers properly. Defend your answers. I'm not concerned about how much you're writing. Quantity is not important for me. It's quality. How well you have been able to defend yourself, your structuring of your answer. That is important. How do you defend? How do you structure? What? Uh, so you just need to structure that and write the answer. And by 1 p.m. today, that's afternoons, I'll be online, right? I'll be there on the Google Classroom. I'll be there. So I'm going to check when you're submitting it. So by 1 p.m. today afternoon, you should be able to write your answer, submit your answer on the Google Classroom as well as upload on the VLE. Okay?
Really?
Is this
Yes,
is
Yes, ma'am.
ma'am.
okay? That's
Yes,
all that I
madam.
have.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, that's all
Okay,
I have
ma'am.
for you today.
Madam.
And any questions, any doubts, if you have, just ask me. Okay, ask me on the group chat. That's fine, right? I'll be
Okay,
answering
ma'am.
Okay,
everything.
ma'am.
Okay,
Okay,
okay. Then.
ma'am.
See you next week.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay,
Okay,
ma'am.
Okay,
See
ma'am.
you, ma'am.
okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am.